Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm LaBrie Wang, Director of Communications at Legal Aid Alberta. On behalf of LAA, I want to thank you for joining us for our first ever public virtual event. Know what to do, how to help someone in a family violence situation. So, though this is a very heavy topic, we want this to be an informal time where we can dialogue and have some conversations as a community. So I want you to know that the speakers may do some back and forth, and you might even hear me say things like, you're on mute sometimes, as you know, in our virtual world now. I just want to thank you and that you guys took the time out of your lunch hour to come. We feel it is important to connect as many Albertans as possible so that we can help build awareness and knowledge so that we know what to do to help people to be safe as the pandemic worsens and winter hits. As you know, today is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and November is Family Violence Prevention Month. More Albertans are turning to legal aid, police, and shelters because of domestic violence amid COVID-19. Applications to legal aid for emergency protection orders have increased this year. We are here to share knowledge and tell you about your legal options if you or someone you know is in a dangerous domestic situation. And please remember that you should call 911 if you are in imminent danger. Now, I'd also like to introduce my co-host, Rob Curtis, who is Senior Communications Officer at LAA. We wanted to host this together. Because this is not a gendered topic. As a community, we all need to know what to do to help a friend or a loved one in a dangerous situation. So over to you, Rob. And Rob, I think you're on mute.
There we go. I had to be the first one to do it, right? Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for attending today. In today's information session, we'll be learning about emergency protection orders and about Legal Aid Alberta's Emergency Protection Order Program. We anticipate the session will last about 45 minutes, including a Q&A session at the end. The way that the Q&A session will work in this online format is through the button that you should see on your screen that says Ask a Question. If you click there, you should have a box come up where you can type a question. Anything you type in there and send will be visible only to LaBrie and myself. And as the presentation goes on, we'll be curating some of these questions and collecting them. And when we get to the Q&A, LaBrie and I will deliver the questions to our presenters verbally, so we'll get your questions to them that way. We do have more than 200 people attending today, though, which is fantastic, but I hope you'll understand that we may not be able to get to every question, and in some cases we might need to collect a few questions together in order to get through as many questions as possible. One reminder is that we are not able to provide legal advice today. This is not a forum in which we can do that, nor can we address very specific personal questions. If you have questions that are a little bit more general about the presentation and the stuff that you're going to learn today, we're happy to throw those to the presenters, though. One thing to let you know as well is that this event is being recorded, and it will be made available on our website within the next week or so. So that's www.legalaid.ab.ca. So check back sometime next week and you'll be able to access a recording of the presentation. So now I'm going to throw it back to LaBrie to tell us a little bit about today's agenda. LaBrie?
Okay, so let's go to the agenda page. So you guys get an idea of what we're doing today. So today we'll start off with a video because we know that not everybody knows about Legal Aid Alberta and what we do. And then we'll have our panelists talk about family violence. How big is the problem in Alberta? What is an emergency protection order? And we'll be going through legal definitions made simple and how to apply for an EPO. Then after that, we will have an Q&A time as well. So let's get the video. Great, thank you. And so today I'd like to introduce our panel. Our legal panel today has almost 40 years of combined legal experience. We have Christina Riddoch, who is legal aid staff lawyer, and she is lead for the Emergency Protection Order Program in Edmonton. And we have Bernadette LaBrie, who is a legal aid staff lawyer, and she's an Emergency Protection Order Program lead in Calgary. And she actually helped build the program in Calgary from the ground up. Both of them started with Legal Aid Alberta in 2007. EPOs are also available to all Albertans. LAA lawyers also support the process at various levels outside of Edmonton and Calgary. Bernadette and Christina spend all day, every day, working to keep at-risk people safe. We are grateful to have them join us in between court sessions today. So over to you, Tina. Okay, I think Tina, you're also on mute.
So I'm the second one today. So let me introduce myself. I am Christina Riddoch. I am the Emergency Protection Order Program Team Lead for here in Edmonton. So in terms of putting what we're talking about today into some context, just how big is family violence a problem in Alberta? So I think on the screen you see a stat of all reported violent crime in Canada in 2016, more than 1/4 resulted from family violence. Alberta ranks 3rd among provinces for rates of police-reported family violence and intimate partner violence. Alberta has the 4th highest rate of police-reported sexual assault among all provinces, keeping in mind that 95% of sexual assault survivors do not report their assaults to the police. And in Alberta, the stats show that 43% of Albertans have experienced sexual violence. So in terms of the reality that we're living in right now under a pandemic, COVID-19, we have experienced that indeed an increase in applications to legal aid and phone calls and requests for information about emergency protection orders. There are more incidents of family violence in Alberta amid COVID-19 restrictions. And what we're doing today, we're hoping to address that very issue and what we can do, what we all can do to help. So the next thing, I just want to introduce to you one tool, one order from the court called the Emergency Protection Order. An Emergency Protection Order, or EPO, it can stop the respondent, and the respondent is the person to whom an EPO is granted against. So it can stop that person from going near or entering a specified place. It can prevent a respondent from communicating with or contacting the claimant, and the claimant, of course, is the person to whom has applied and been granted an EPO. So it can prevent a respondent from communicating with or contacting the claimant and other persons directly or indirectly. So that also includes social media. It can allow the claimant to live in a residence without the respondent being there. It can direct a peace officer, which is a police officer as well, to accompany a specified person to a residence to remove personal belongings. The order can also direct the police to seize and store weapons and any other terms judge or justice of the peace finds appropriate. And very often there we find that in regards to any children in the care of the claimant.
So I am Bernadette LaBrie. As Laurie introduced, I am the lead of the Protection Order Program here in Calgary. And And just an interesting little statistic that I came across or created, I guess, on the weekend with respect to children. I was crunching some numbers, and there are numbers of children that have been protected by an emergency protection order year over year, 2019, 2020, with COVID has gone up by 12.5%, which is a really, really startling statistic. 12.5% more kids being protected by protection orders. And I think that the link is probably pretty clear that COVID has had a lot to do with this. So back to the Act, the Protection Against Family Violence Act, it's very definition heavy. And the first definition that a person needs to look at when they're considering applying for an emergency protection order is the definition of family. So you can only apply for an EPO against another family member, and a family member would be two people who are or have been married to one another. So if there's been a divorce or been a separation, that person is still considered a family member. If people are residing or have resided together in an intimate relationship in the past, and this is a very interesting legal point. In our office, the shortest time we've been able to obtain an EPO, pardon me, that's not going to make much sense. The shortest time people have lived together and we've been able to obtain an EPO is a period of 2 weeks. They'd only been living together for 2 weeks, but we were able to show that the other person had moved into the house. They had an intention to live together in an intimate relationship, and the judge felt that that fell within the definition, and these two people were family members. So another family member category is where two people are the parents of one or more children together. Another category if they're related by blood, marriage, or adoption. And then there is any children in the care of any of the other types of relationships that I've discussed. The last category is persons who reside together and one has the care and control over the other pursuant to a court order. This would include situations where someone has been named by the court as a guardian of another person, even though they may not be in another way family members. What we find is that the largest category of people who do not apply under the definition of family are those that are in a dating relationship. A dating relationship does not fall into any of these categories, and there are other forms of different types of restraining orders that would be applicable to people in that situation, but unfortunately an EPO is not one of them. So the next definition that we want to consider is the definition of violence. And you see a repeat of a phrase here, intentional or reckless act. An intentional act is certainly just what it says it is. Someone intends to do something to another person. Reckless is a little bit more of a legal definition, but I think it still makes some pretty good intuitive sense that the person is reckless. They don't care what the consequences of their actions are. So violence can be an intentional or reckless act that causes injury or harms a family member. It can be an intentional or reckless act that damages property. So if a person goes on a rampage and is destroying the kitchen or is putting holes in the wall with their fist, that is violence. The next category would be any act or threat to act that intimidates a family member by creating reasonable fear of injury or property damage. So it doesn't have to actually occur, that it's an act or threat to act that can intimidate. The big word in this particular definition is reasonable fear. So when you're making a claim for an EPO under this particular category of violence, you have to show that your fear was reasonable. Forced confinement is another act of violence, sexual abuse, and stalking. Stalking is a difficult one to prove, but certainly is one that we have been able to maintain on quite a number of occasions. And that stalking may or may not rise to the criminal standard of stalking, but even if it doesn't rise to the criminal standard, it doesn't mean that it's going to be discounted as violence under an emergency protection order. Now, the last definition that we want to look at is what is an emergency? And this is an important consideration when one is applying for an emergency protection order. The situation has to be so serious or urgent that the order is necessary for the immediate protection of the claimant and other named family members. One of the big things that we have to remind ourselves, and sometimes the court of, is that the conjunctive in this case is or. The situation must be serious or urgent, not necessarily both, but you need to be able to prove one of those before you're going to be able to apply for an emergency protection order. If you can't show seriousness or urgency, again, there are other remedies in the law that you could use in order to protect yourself or other family members. And I think we'll pass it back to Christina now.
Thanks, Bernadette. So I just want to note as well that I see that there are a number of questions that are coming in, and we'll get to them through our moderators at the end. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about now is, well, how do you apply for an EPO? What's the next step after that like? What's the hearing like? What is the issue of service, and when is it reviewed? So we'll go through each of these steps now. So the first step, if you or someone you know should be looking at some information, or you want some information about family violence, or is what's happening to me or someone that I know and love, would that qualify for an emergency protection order? So your first step would be to call in Calgary and area 403-297-5260. And here in Edmonton, it would be 780-422-9222. Elsewhere in Alberta, call your local police, victim services unit, shelters for information. Regardless, you can always contact either Calgary or Edmonton as well, and we'll see what we can do to provide information and assistance where we can. And in terms of the applying, and then once an EPO is obtained, you're going to go to, once you've contacted our office, the next stage would then be the application for an EPO in a hearing. So either before a provincial court judge or a justice of the peace here in Calgary and Edmonton area, as well anywhere else in Alberta, you're likely going before a justice of the peace to make your application for an emergency protection order. In Calgary and Edmonton, we have provincial court duty counsels who can meet with a claimant or someone looking for an emergency protection order or someone looking for information. They can meet with them. Right now, it would be over the phone. Our offices here in Edmonton are closed in-person contact due to COVID. However, our duty counsels are accessible by phone. So they can review the requirements for an emergency protection order, as Bernadette had reviewed earlier. Does the matter qualify for an EPO, and then assist and bring the matter forward before provincial court judge for review and application at the hearing for an EPO. And as you might be aware, there are many more steps to go through, but just in terms of the basic steps, the next step after an emergency protection order is granted, that order must be served according to the law that Bernadette indicated, the Protection Against Family Violence Act. So the EPO granted must be served by a police officer on the respondent. So the person that the claimant has obtained an EPO against, and that's served as reasonably quickly as possible by that police officer. And once that service has been effected and the respondent has been given notice of the emergency protection order, on that order, it will also say when that order is going to be reviewed. So within 9 working days, that emergency protection order must be reviewed by the Court of Queen's Bench. And as the slide indicates there, the EPO is confirmed or revoked by a judge. In very basic terms, there are other options that a judge can do as well, such as a Queen's Bench protection order. At the review hearing, 9 working days after that EPO has been served, the claimant and respondent may go to court. So right now, in terms of what the process is, the claimant and respondent may appear by what's called WebEx, a video conference, or by telephone, so that they can appear in court without actually having to be present in court due to COVID. So again, the very basic, very starting point for seeking information about emergency protection orders or other protection order information and other resources available, please call either of these numbers. So in Calgary, again, 403-297-5260, and in Edmonton, 780-422-9222. Elsewhere in Alberta, contact your local police detachment, and always, if there's immediate danger, call 911.
So next, I'd like to talk about a few safety tips if you or someone that you know, someone that you love, is in a domestic violence situation. Check up on that person, check up on people regularly, see how they're doing, see if there's anything that they need. But my biggest caution there would be, I'd ask you to think before you leave voicemail messages, before you do emails, before you do any sort of communication. Our world is wonderfully connected these days, but unfortunately it can also be a bit of a hindrance in a domestic violence situation, because you can never assume that any of your communications are private. So think a little bit before you leave that voicemail message or send that text or send that email, and make sure that you're not going to put them in a worse situation than they were before you got involved. Next important thing is to believe what the victim or the person that you believe is a victim of domestic violence is saying. It can be very discouraging when the person is not believed. These are the kinds of things that happen behind closed doors. The injuries don't always show. Bruises are hidden and covered up, and the emotional injury, which is often worse than the physical injury, is not something that that everyone else can see. So believe what the person is saying. And the third one is to do your homework, be informed, know about what resources are out there, know about when you should and should not get involved, and try and put yourself in the other person's shoes a little bit in order to appreciate the situation that they find themselves in. One other safety tip that isn't on there and is a don't, is that don't be confrontational. with the person that you suspect is abusing someone. Often that can create greater danger for their family member, for their spouse, for their partner. When the abuser starts to feel threatened, that people are starting to know, and perhaps accusing the victim of telling our secrets or of exaggerating and all of those kinds of things. So don't confront the abuser for those reasons, but also it might be dangerous for yourself. The third point I would make there is that by confronting an abuser, you're not respecting the boundaries of the victim. A victim of domestic violence walks on eggshells every single day, and it's going to be up to them to choose when and how they extract themselves from that situation. The best thing you can do is to be supportive, but I would never advise being confrontational. So the next thing that I just want to touch on is where people can find support in Alberta. Many organizations offer legal clinics and events like Legal Aid is putting on today, where there is information about domestic violence, some of it very general, some of it very specific. And if you're looking for information, it's well worth asking those questions and seeking out those kinds of clinics. Social support agencies are also a tremendous resource. On the website, we are going to have a list of social support agencies, and I believe Rob is going to refer to that at the end of the presentation. And they're very worthwhile looking up. They're people who are passionate about this, that have knowledge about this, and have resources that can help support victims and families in a domestic violence situation. We have an amazing network of emergency shelters across the province, and the best way to find out about them and to find out about capacity, to find out if there would be space available for someone, is to get onto the website of the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters. They are a tremendous resource. They have gotten the shelters together kind of under one umbrella in terms of sharing resources and sharing information. And it is really a huge benefit to Alberta to have the Alberta Council doing the work that they're doing.
So I just want to also thank Tina and Bernadette. Thank you so much for taking time between your court sessions to come and share that knowledge that is so valuable to the community. And we just want to say again that we will be sending out the link to this the recorded session to everybody that has registered. So that email that you registered with, we will send that out to you. In addition, it will be posted on our website. So if you do find it informative, please do share it with friends and family. The more people are aware, the more people are have that knowledge, the better. And then yes, we will try to collect the questions and respond back, or if you want to email communications@legalaid.ab.ca, we can try to do our best to answer those questions for you. Hopefully Tina and Bernadette are okay with that I just committed them to that. And so, yeah, anything else, Rob, that you like, closing comments?
Just want to encourage people to check out our website, www.legalaid.ab.ca, to find those support services that Bernadette mentioned during the presentation. You'll be able to find a lot of great resources there. You'll be able to find the phone numbers that were mentioned during the conversation today. And down the road, you'll be able to find a recording of this presentation as well. So do come and check us out on the web. And just to echo Laurie's comments, thank you so much, Tina and Bernadette. And thank you to everyone who's attending for being here today.